The quiet move happened at sea. No massive announcement, no emergency summit, no dramatic speech from Downing Street. Just a British destroyer, leaving the Mediterranean, and heading toward one of the most dangerous waterways on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. And according to reports, this wasn't routine deployment. This was preparation. Because after weeks of escalating tensions surrounding Iran, commercial shipping, and naval confrontations in the Gulf, Britain is now positioning military assets for what officials are carefully calling a potential Hormuz mission. And when warships start moving before politicians start speaking, military planners know something serious may already be underway. The vessel at the center of this story is HMS Dragon, a Type 45 Royal Navy destroyer, one of Britain's most advanced air defense warships, built to detect, track, and intercept incoming aerial threats at long range. And now, it's moving closer to the Gulf, closer to the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow maritime corridor through which a massive portion of the world's oil and energy shipments still pass every single day. And that changes the calculation immediately. Because Hormuz is not just another shipping lane, it's one of the most strategically sensitive choke points on the planet. The headlines focused on the deployment itself. UK sends destroyer. Royal Navy heads to Middle East. But the real story is why now? Because this move comes during one of the most unstable periods the region has seen in years. The conflict involving Iran, the fragile ceasefire efforts, the disruption to commercial shipping, all of it has pushed global powers into contingency planning mode. And according to Reuters reporting, Britain and France are now discussing broader multinational operations designed to restore confidence in maritime traffic through the strait. That phrase sounds diplomatic. But in military language, it means preparing for the possibility that deterrence may fail. To understand why this matters, you need to understand the geography. The Strait of Hormuz is narrow, exceptionally narrow in operational terms. At some points, commercial vessels are forced into tightly controlled shipping corridors. That makes them vulnerable, not just to missiles, not just to drones, but to mines, fast attack boats, electronic warfare, and naval harassment operations. And when tensions rise there, energy markets react instantly. Because the strait is one of the world's most important energy arteries, any disruption affects oil prices, insurance costs, shipping routes, and global supply chains almost immediately. That's why major naval powers monitor the area constantly. And that's why HMS Dragon moving toward the region matters far beyond Britain itself. This is not an aircraft carrier. It's not designed for invasion. HMS Dragon is an air defense destroyer. Its job is protection, tracking threats, defending fleets, securing maritime operations. The Type 45 class was specifically designed to counter saturation aerial threats, cruise missiles, drones, aircraft. And that detail becomes important when you look at how warfare in the region has evolved. Because recent conflicts have shown something clearly. Cheap drones and missiles can pressure even advanced naval systems through volume alone. And the Royal Navy knows that. This is where the story becomes larger than Britain. France has already moved naval assets toward the Red Sea as part of broader planning tied to Hormuz security operations. The United States remains heavily involved in the region. Iran continues to signal that pressure in Hormuz remains part of its broader strategic leverage. And now European powers are positioning themselves for a possible multinational maritime mission, not necessarily combat, but presence. And sometimes, presence is the strategy. Because military deployments send messages long before weapons are ever used. This is not just about war, it's about pressure. Because the global economy depends on stability in maritime routes like Hormuz. And when insurers fear attacks, shipping slows. When shipping slows, prices rise. Energy costs climb. Supply chains tighten. Markets become volatile. That's why even limited disruptions inside the strait create international consequences almost immediately. And governments know it. Which is why the conversation around Hormuz is no longer regional, it's global. Here's the dangerous part. Not full-scale war. Misunderstanding. Because crowded waterways filled with military ships, drones, surveillance aircraft, and armed patrol boats create enormous risk. One radar lock, one warning shot, one navigation error. And suddenly, multiple countries are forced into decisions they never intended to make. Military planners understand this deeply. That's why deployments like HMS Dragon are often described publicly as defensive, because the goal is deterrence, prevent escalation. protect shipping, stabilize movement. But deterrence only works if every side believes the other side is willing to act, and that's where things become unpredictable. Officially, Britain says this is prudent planning, and strategically, that makes sense. Because if the strait becomes unstable again, waiting to deploy assets later could be too slow. Naval operations require positioning in advance, fuel, logistics, support ships, air cover, coordination with allies. All of that takes time, so moving the destroyer now gives Britain options later, and in military strategy, options matter. This deployment also sends another signal. Europe is preparing for the possibility that Hormuz security may require broader international involvement, not just American naval power, not just Gulf states, but multinational coordination. And according to recent reporting, discussions involving multiple countries have already taken place regarding future maritime security operations tied to the strait. That suggests governments are preparing for a long-term instability scenario, not just a short crisis. HMS Dragon firing no missiles tonight does not mean nothing is happening. In geopolitics, movement is communication, and warships rarely reposition without purpose. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the world's most fragile pressure points. The shipping lanes remain tense, the ceasefire remains fragile, and the military buildup around the region continues quietly in the background. Britain says this is preparation. Military planners call it positioning. But either way, the world's major powers are clearly treating Hormuz as a place where the next escalation could happen fast. And once naval forces from multiple countries begin concentrating in the same narrow waterway, history shows the margin for error becomes dangerously small. So while headlines focused on one British destroyer, the real story may be what its movement reveals about what governments think could happen next. And if more warships begin arriving, that signal will become impossible to ignore. Subscribe to Cobalt.